Would Anton Frondell benefit more from playing in the NHL or SHL next season? I'll share my thoughts on the matter, and we'll also break down the biggest winners and losers from NHL free agency.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Check me out on X at Jack Bushman 2, but make sure to follow my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. All right, Blackhawks fans, opening things up here on today's show, a discussion around 2025 third overall pick Anton Frondell, as Scott Powers of The Athletic recently dropped a Blackhawks 2025-26 roster prediction going line by line, pairing by pairing, which is also similar to something I'll be dropping here on the show in the near future. Make sure to keep your eyes out for that. But in this article from Scott, he had a really fascinating tidbit around Anton Frondell and possibly his future with the Blackhawks as early as this upcoming season, saying, quote, "The more I hear about what the Blackhawks think of Anton Frondell, the more I think he's going to stick with them out of training camp. How he does in the Tom Curver's Prospect Showcase could be an early indication. That's always been a huge barometer for me over the years. I think back to Gustav Forsling, Alex DeBrincat, and more recently Connor Bedard and Wyatt Kaiser, and how those players separated themselves from most in the rookie games. And in the case of Anton Frondell, the Blackhawks are likely to give him every opportunity to make the team, meaning he'll likely play in a lot of preseason games too. And with the focus being so much on development and playing the young players this season, there's really no downside for him being in the NHL, and he can also be sent to Rockford if they want, close quote. So obviously a lot to get into here from this tidbit by Scott Powers regarding how the Blackhawks possibly think of Anton Frondell. And just going into this year's draft class, Blackhawks fans, I think the consensus was the only player that would be NHL ready right out of the gate, if any, would be Michael Misa, considering Matthew Schaefer just was only able to play 22 games last season because of the injury, and he's not going to be turning 18 all the way until September, right? The likelihood of him going to the NHL with the Islanders right out of the jump is very slim. So it felt like it was going to be Michael Misa or maybe no one in this year's draft class. However, seems like the Blackhawks could think Anton Frondell is ready to make that jump, according to Scott Powers. And there is reason to think that, right? Because Frondell has already played pro hockey over in Sweden, albeit in their second pro league, the Hockey Allsvenskan League, but already played against grown men at the pro level and put up very respectable numbers, 25 points in 29 games, 11 goals and 14 assists. Also ended the season on a much better note than he started, was banged up a little bit to open up the year. Also had a little bit of a poor showing at the U18 World Juniors, but really ramped things up as the season progressed. And again, just has not only the experience of playing pro hockey, but has the size and the mold to handle that, I believe, at this age. 6'1", already well over 200 pounds, plays a responsible, mature game for his age, very good on both sides of the ice, knows also how to use his size to his advantage. A lot of skills that many folks, many scouts, analysts, a lot of us Blackhawks fans believe are going to translate well to the next level. So I could certainly understand why the Blackhawks think this way about Anton Frondell. As far as the pros of him staying in Chicago as opposed to going back to Djurgårdens, where they're actually going to be moving up to the SHL this upcoming season because they won the Hockey Allsvenskan League, I would say the biggest pro for Frondell playing with the Blackhawks right out of the gate is that, you know, he gets acquainted to that NHL sheet a little bit earlier, right off the jump at 18 years of age. And in addition to that, is obviously going to be building chemistry with guys like Connor Bedard, Frank Nazar, Sam Renzel, Artie Levshinov, the group of this young core that everyone is hopeful going to be big puzzle pieces for the Blackhawks in the future. Those obviously would be the huge benefits, getting experience to play in the top six, because I'd imagine if the Blackhawks keep him around, he's likely going to be playing a sizable role, and just getting that experience at an early age. I do think more times than not, if they're ready for it, if you really believe that they're able to handle that level, then you probably should send them that direction, especially when it's a situation like Scott Powers alluded to. The Blackhawks are going to be so focused on the young players next season. It's going to be all about them. Anton Frondell would be in a really good spot. As far as the pros to going back with Djurgårdens and playing in the SHL, he obviously just won't have that pressure of being an NHLer right out of his draft year in a big market like Chicago that's dying for something exciting to happen here as far as the sports go. Obviously, all eyes would be on him along with Connor Bedard. He wouldn't have, as much hype or weight on his shoulders, I think, as Bedard did coming into the league, but there would be a lot of eyeballs on Anton Frondell. Would probably just be a little bit out of his comfort zone, considering he's just a young kid coming from Sweden. Would be a little bit of a culture shock, I would imagine, as well. Whereas, staying in the SHL, he's going to be in his comfort zone and would be allowed to build off of the momentum that he closed last season with, pick up right where he left off, and go and also play in a very respectable league. The SHL, widely considered one of the best leagues in hockey outside of the NHL. So he would be getting very valuable experience in that league as well, and likely a very good opportunity with Djurgårdens too, going to be playing an even larger role than he did last season, I'd imagine. So there's pros, honestly, to both sides. I could make a case either way. My personal thoughts on the matter: do I think Anton Frondell makes the Blackhawks out of training camp? Obviously, we're in the middle of July here, so anything could go from this point on. We don't know what's going to go down in training camp, preseason, the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase. So it's all a little bit of a guessing game. But if I had to take a guess right here, right now, I would say the Blackhawks, considering how they've handled prospects in the past, if they feel he's even close to ready, I just think again, how they've gone about things in the past, they probably prefer to have Anton Frondell under their guidance over here in North America. I'm sure they're, okay with everything that would go down at Djurgårdens. They would just prefer him under their watch. And also, like Scott Powers said, he can also be sent to Rockford if the Blackhawks want him to as well. And I feel like that would be a very interesting decision, Rockford or the SHL. He would obviously be getting a pretty big role with both of those teams. I don't know what would be more beneficial. The AHL has gotten a lot better in recent years, but as I talked about, the SHL, a very respectable league overseas too. I think just being in his element, personally, I would like Anton Frondell to just go and play well in the SHL for Djurgårdens this upcoming season. Again, pick up where he left off last year and come over to North America the following season with a lot of confidence and some really good momentum. That's the way that I would prefer it, but I'm guessing if he looks sharp in the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase, if he looks like he can handle himself in the preseason, I'm going to guess the Blackhawks are going to give him that opportunity because, again, it does make sense to give him this experience to help him in that transition at a young age to the NHL sheet and give him some reps along with Connor Bedard and Frankie Nazar in the top six, guys who are probably going to be what the Blackhawks are hoping for, line mates, not sure exactly which one, but one of the two. Frondell is probably going to be playing alongside for a long, long time here in Chicago. So I'm sure they'd want to get them acquainted with one another and establishing that chemistry at a young age. I'm going to guess that's the way it goes right here, right now, Blackhawks fans. But again, we're in the middle of July, so it's all a little bit of a guessing game at this point in time, but very interesting to hear this noteworthy tidbit from Scott Powers and just how highly the Blackhawks think of Anton Frondell. And again, does make sense. Good play in the Hockey Allsvenskan League last year. good size to his game for being a young man, over 200 pounds, plays a responsible game, tested very well at the NHL scouting combine, right? Has been labeled like an absolute bull out there on the ice. So we'll see what winds up happening, but there are my thoughts on Anton Frondell and whether he could crack the Blackhawks NHL roster for the 25-26 season. Also, want to mention here real quick, forgot to bring this up a moment ago. I mentioned that, oh boy, who was it? Actually, I didn't mention that on the podcast yet. Did I? Now I'm confusing myself. Regardless, Anton Frondell received an invite to Team Sweden's World Juniors Summer Showcase. Absolutely no surprise there. Hopefully he'll have a better showing at the World Juniors than he did last year. It will be a lot of fun seeing him play for Team Sweden. But again, that takes care of my thoughts on Anton Frondell's chances of making the Blackhawks NHL roster. Coming up in just a moment here, stick with me for segment 2 as I'll break down the biggest moves from free agency all across the NHL. But first, real quick, I got to talk to you all about FanDuel. Summer sports are now in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or sweating my bet all the way down to the 9th inning, FanDuel really makes it feel like I'm a part of the action. And if you're new to FanDuel, if you're not already a member, then that's perfect. Go and download the FanDuel Sportsbook app or go to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now in order to get started. Again, it's the FanDuel Sportsbook app or FanDuel.com/lockedon in order to get started. Real quick, before I get into segment 2, Blackhawks fans, usual reminder, if you enjoy what you're watching on YouTube today, or even if you enjoy what you're listening to through whatever audio platform you're tuning in through, please make sure to go on over to YouTube or hit that button right below this big screen to subscribe to the channel. It's 100% free, will not cost you anything, really does help me out in a massive way, more than any of you could truly know. Please help me out throughout the course of this summer. Segment 2, though, wanted to get into the major moves from NHL free agency. Haven't really touched on what went down all across the league. I'm sure, most of you tuning into a Blackhawks podcast in the middle of the summer, in the middle of frickin' July, you're probably aware of all the signings and the sign and trades that have gone down over the past 9 days. But just with, the Blackhawks, the NHL draft, their moves during free agency, their lack of moves during free agency, I haven't been able to kind of give my 2 cents on the most noteworthy transactions that have transpired in the last week and a half, and even a little bit before then, as free agent market was not as, we didn't expect it to be, a super deep free agent market, but certainly not as many names as we expected, because a lot of big name players just elected to stay with their same teams. I don't even know what they're hiring agents for anymore. Taking some team-friendly deals, not maybe capitalizing as much as they could have on the open market despite the salary cap going up. Some guys did, some guys didn't. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of NHL free agency here. Starting off with the most noteworthy move that went down, Mitch Marner, the sign and trade between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Vegas Golden Knights. Because, of course, if you're talking about a team that's always trying to make the biggest swings, I would take my hat off, but I got some horrible hat hair going on to tip my cap to the Vegas Golden Knights, even though they go about it in scummy ways sometimes. If it's within the rules, they're allowed to do it, and they have an owner, they have a general manager who are willing to put the gas pedal down full throttle at all times. And in my opinion, I know the Vegas Golden Knights aren't a beloved team by most hockey fans, but I think there's something you got to respect about how they try to win and put together an interesting team every single season. And it's turned into a very successful franchise out there in the desert. And there's going to be more intrigue around Vegas this upcoming season now that they've landed Mitch Marner, signed him to an 8-year, $12 million contract, cap hit of $12 million per year. Maybe not Well, 12 million. Yeah, that was right around the ballpark. I think most folks were expecting Mitch Marner to get the 8-year contract. Blackhawks were never really truly in consideration for Mitch Marner, according to several different reports, which is not all that surprising, in my opinion, considering the position the Blackhawks are in, Mitch Marner's age, the contract they were going to have to give out, some question marks about his contributions when the lights are the brightest, when the games matter the most. I think that's a little bit overblown, but there's also some truth to that. Mitch Marner has not been at his best when the Toronto Maple Leafs needed him the most in, elimination games, 5, 6, and 7. He is still, a Selke Trophy caliber winger, which is absolutely incredible. A guy who can play on the penalty kill, despite being a little bit undersized, and is a consistent 90-point producer, done it in 4 of the last 7 years. Had 100 points this past season with Toronto. Like, Mitch Marner is a gosh darn good player, but I didn't expect the Blackhawks to be in the running for him, and I'm not really all that disappointed that they didn't come away with him at the end of the day. But is going to be with Vegas for a long, long time now, and is going to give them even more firepower to their forward group. Nicholas Waugh is the one who goes to Toronto as part of this sign and trade. Speaking of sign and trades, we obviously got another one right before the NHL draft with Noah Dobson being dealt from the New York Islanders to the Montreal Canadiens. The 2 picks that went back to New York really felt like they made the most of them, selecting Victor Eklund and Kashawn Aitchison. And to come away with those 2 as well as Matthew Schaefer, like, the New York Islanders, in my opinion, absolutely crushed day one. But I absolutely love this trade from the Montreal Canadiens. You got to give in order to get, and they have Lane Hudson on the back end, the Calder Trophy winner. Now they got Noah Dobson, signed him to an 8-year deal with a $9.5 million cap hit. Something special is brewing in Montreal. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but I think a really good move there by the Canadiens. Also, good piece of business for the New York Islanders as well. Then we got a third sign and trade, as JJ Peterka was not dealt to the Blackhawks, despite some rumors that they were seriously kicking the tires on him. Maybe the 3rd overall pick was in play. There's been some rumors about that, and if that is true, I couldn't believe the Sabres turning down the 3rd pick for JJ Peterka. The 3rd pick has a chance to be a game breaker. JJ Peterka is a really good player. I don't think he's a game breaker, and he's also a winger. Really good guy, good winger. 27 goals each of the last 2 seasons, had 68 points this past year. Utah's getting a real good one here, and I think it's a fair contract. 5 years, $7.7 million. With the way the salary cap's going to go up, I think that's a good piece of business. But an interesting offseason, to say the least, from Buffalo. Utah, though, continues to make moves. Matthew Knies, John Tavares, 2 players the Toronto Maple Leafs did retain here this offseason. Matthew Knies was a restricted free agent, didn't wind up getting any offer sheets as they got a contract done to avoid all that junk. 6-year deal at $7.75 million for Knies, who's still only 22 years old, had 58 points last year, 29 goals and 29 assists in 78 games. And then John Tavares, who is set to turn 35 in September. He signed a 4-year deal with a $4.38 million AAV, which, he's going to be 39 when it expires. I'm sure he's going to slow down pretty severely when that time comes, but I still think this is a pretty good, very fair deal for Tavares, who's consistently a point per game player as he's entered his 30s, had 38 goals for the Maple Leafs this last year, key leader for that team. That's a really good team-friendly deal by the Leafs to get him back. Nikolai Ehlers, took him a little while to make his decision. He ended up signing with the Carolina Hurricanes, 6 years, $8.5 million cap hit, 29-year-old dynamic offensive player who has really good speed. All about offense with Nikolai Ehlers, though. That is something to consider, but has had 20 goals in 8 of his 10 NHL seasons. The only 2 that he didn't were his rookie season and 2 years ago, in which he only played 45 games. So a shoe into pot 20 every single season. He's had 55 points in 3 of the last 4 years. Brings some more speed and skill to Carolina, which should definitely help, although they didn't really address the center ice position here this summer. Matt Duchene stayed on with the Dallas Stars, 4 years, $4.5 million AAV. Interesting that the Stars brought him back, considering their cap situation. I think $4.5 million is fair for Duchene. 4 years is probably a little long for a 34-year-old, but did have 82 points in 82 games this past season, including 30 goals. The production dipped a little bit during the Stanley Cup playoffs, but a good piece of business, I would say, overall for the Stars and Duchene. Brock Boeser, one of those players I mentioned that elected to stay home instead of departing in the free agent market. He shocked everyone by signing a 7-year extension with the Vancouver Canucks, and considering all the turmoil around that organization the last few years, I didn't expect this to happen. $7.25 million cap hit, though, for Brock Boeser, and at that, length, the guaranteed money probably helped sway him back to the west side of Canada. 28 years old now, as Brock Boeser had 50 points in this past season, 25 goals, 25 assists, but did have 73, including 40 goals in the year prior when things were going really well for the Canucks. Getting into more players who elected to stay home, the Florida Panthers, Aaron Ekblad, 8-year deal, $6.1 million AAV, long-term contract to lock him up in Florida. But $6.1 million, he surely could have got more than that on the free agent market. Taking a little bit of a team-friendly AAV in order to get a long-term deal, but considering they also brought back Brad Marchand, considering they also brought back Sam Bennett, I really didn't think they were going to find the room to bring back Aaron Ekblad. And once they got Seth Jones, I didn't really think they needed Aaron Ekblad. They had Seth as their number one they could slide in on the right-hand side. He's also someone who's just been so injury prone throughout his career. He hasn't played 80 games since the 2018-19 season. So I didn't expect Ekblad to stay. He was the one of the group I thought that was going to hit the market, but that isn't the case. Neither is Brad Marchand. 6-year deal with a $5.25 million AAV, which is a front-loaded contract for the 37-year-old. I saw 6 years at first, and I was like, that is crazy for a 37-year-old Brad Marchand, but then thought about it a little more. I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely going to be front-loaded. 20 points Marchand had, 10 goals and 10 assists in 23 playoff games to help the Florida Panthers go back-to-back. His first Stanley Cup since 2011. And then Sam Bennett got the big boy deal of the group, 8 years with an $8 million AAV. He's 29 and has had 14-plus points in each of the last 3 postseasons to help the Panthers get to the Stanley Cup final in each of those 3 years, win the cup in the last 2. And oh yeah, he had 15 goals in 23 postseason games this year. An absolute madman was Sam Bennett. The Florida Panthers, truly a scary offseason to think about. Jonathan Drouin wound up leaving the Colorado Avalanche to sign a 2-year deal with a $4 million AAV with the New York Islanders. He had 37 points, 11 goals, and 26 assists in 43 games with the Avs this past season and had 56 points the year prior. James Van Riemsdyk, still playing in the NHL, signed a 1-year deal, $1 million AAV with the Detroit Red Wings. 36 years old now is James Van Riemsdyk, but still a consistent 30-plus point producer, even though he has some cement in his skates at this point of his career. But good on JVR. Should be a good spot for him, along with Patty Kane, Alex DeBrincat. Maybe I guess he's a winger, so no one would be playing center on that line, but would have been a good spot for him to go in the Artem Anisimov role and just crash the net and clean up some rebounds if he was able to play center. Tanner Jeannot signed a 5-year deal, $3.4 million AAV with the Boston Bruins. A little bit more than I thought he was going to get, but again, with the way the salary cap is going up, so are these deals. As he only had 13 points in 67 games last year. And remember when Tampa Bay traded their entire draft to get Tanner Jeannot? He's an effective two-way player, but from an offensive perspective, hasn't really been all that productive these last 2 years. Morgan Geekie, speaking of the Bruins, signed a 6-year deal with a $5.5 million AAV. He'll turn 27 later this month and is coming off of a career year with the Bruins, 33 goals and 24 assists for 57 points in 77 games. So makes sense for them to bring him back. We know the Bruins like their gritty two-way forwards. They definitely got a pair of those in Tanner Jeannot and Morgan Geekie. Maybe didn't add as much skill as they needed to, though, this offseason. Moving on to the back end, talking about some defensemen here. Evan Bouchard, big deal for Evan in Edmonton, 4-year contract with a $10.5 million AAV. And it's absolutely well-deserved for one of the best offensive defensemen in the NHL. Had 67 points, 14 goals, and 53 assists in 82 games this past season. Also had 18 goals the year prior and has been awesome for Edmonton in each of their last 2 Stanley Cup final runs. Had 32 points in 25 postseason games last year and 23 points in 22 postseason games this year. That man definitely earned that contract. Ivan Provorov wound up staying with Columbus, signed a 7-year deal with an $8.5 million cap hit, which I thought was a very peculiar decision. He's a good two-way player, 28 years old, good puck mover, had 33 points, 7 goals, 26 assists in 82 games last year, but 7 years at that price, I don't know if that's going to age very well for Columbus. K'Andre Miller, forgot to put him up in the sign and trade category as he got dealt from the New York Rangers, former first-round pick of theirs, to the Carolina Hurricanes, where he signed an 8-year deal with a $7.5 million cap hit, replacing Dmitry Orlov, who I'll get to here in just a second. But K'Andre has established himself as a reliable second-pairing defenseman in the NHL. Good size, good reach, decent puck-moving defenseman as well. 27 points for him, 7 goals, and 20 assists in 74 games for the Rangers this past season. Alexander Romanov signed an 8-year deal at $6.25 million with the New York Islanders. He's another, good young two-way defenseman, but 8 years. That was very interesting from the Isles. He had 20 points, 4 goals, and 16 assists in 64 games last year after being dealt from the Montreal Canadiens. Dmitry Orlov, who I mentioned from a moment ago, he signed a 2-year deal with a $6.5 million AAV with the San Jose Sharks. And I think this is a good piece of business by San Jose. Orlov is a really effective player on both sides of the ice, plays a lot bigger than his size as he's only like 5'10" or 5'11", but can be really physical and a consistent point producer on the back end. He had 28 points, 6 goals, 22 assists, and 76 games with Carolina last season. Has a lot of good overall playoff experience. John Klingberg also signed with the San Jose Sharks, 1-year, $4 million deal. Injuries have really hampered Klingberg's career these last few seasons, so don't really know if there's a ton of upside there for him in San Jose, but not a lot of risk at a 1-year contract, and San Jose can certainly spend the money. Cody Ceci signed a 4-year deal with a $4.5 million AAV with the Los Angeles Kings. They also gave out a $4 million deal for 3 years to Brian Dumoulin, which I thought was really interesting. 2 guys that haven't really been all that effective in the Stanley Cup playoffs for quite some time. Brent Burns, he signed a 1-year deal, $1 million with the Colorado Avalanche, adding to Cale Makar and Josh Manson on the right side. He's still a very reliable player at 40 years of age. He's played 82 games in each of the last 4 seasons and had 29 points, 6 goals, and 23 assists in 82 games last year with Carolina. Still has something to give on the offensive side of things. Gustav Nyquist, after a disastrous year for him this past year with Nashville and Minnesota, where he only had 8 5-on-5 points all year long. And that was coming off of a career year for him where he had 75 points, 23 goals, and a whopping 52 assists the year prior. Definitely hurt the money that he was going to make in the free agent market this summer. Just a 1-year deal for him at $3.25 million for the Winnipeg Jets. Going to be interesting to see which Gustav Nyquist they get, as he's kind of a Nikolai Ehlers replacement for them. Michael Granlund, sought-after player on the free agent market, wound up signing a 3-year deal with a $7 million AAV for the Anaheim Ducks. 33-year-old forward was very productive last year for San Jose and Dallas at 66 points, 22 goals, and 44 assists in 83 combined games. Getting up there in age, though, will be interesting to see if Granlund can continue that production in Anaheim, which is another team that feels like they kind of got something special brewing there. Andrew Mangiapane wound up signing a 2-year deal with a $3.6 million AAV with the Edmonton Oilers. Decent, speedy, offensive-minded winger. He had 28 points, 14 goals, 14 assists, and 81 games for the Washington Capitals last year in his lone season with them. Corey Perry, who has lost 5 of the last 6 Stanley Cups, which is truly a remarkable statistic. He leaves Edmonton, signs a 1-year deal with a $2.5 million AAV with the Los Angeles Kings. And like Brent Burns, Corey Perry is now 40 years of age, but there's still some juice to squeeze out of his game. He was a very effective player, whether you like him or not, Blackhawks fans. For the Edmonton Oilers in their Stanley Cup final run, had 14 points in 22 games during the Stanley Cup playoffs. Jake Allen signed a 5-year deal with a $1.8 million AAV in New Jersey to kind of create a tandem there with Jacob Markstrom. Nate Schmidt, Stanley Cup champion with the Florida Panthers, wound up signing a 3-year deal, $3.5 million AAV with the Utah Mammoth. Turned 34 years old a couple of days ago, starting to get up there in his career, but was very good for Florida in the playoffs. 12 points in 23 postseason games. Also added 19 points in 80 games during the regular season. So good to see a guy like Nate Schmidt get his Stanley Cup, as that's who Alexander Barkov passed it to, and also capitalize on it in the free agent market. Then the last defenseman I wanted to bring up as well, Vladislav Gavrikov, signed a 7-year deal with a $7 million AAV with the New York Rangers. He'll likely be jumping up on that top pairing along with Adam Fox after they lost Ryan Lindgren. And Gavrikov, very effective two-way player, 29 years old, had 30 points, 5 goals, and 25 assists in 82 games for the Kings this last season. Before I move into segment 3, and I know we're starting to get up there on today's episode, I'll be wrapping it up here in just a moment, but I got 3 Blackhawks legends that I forgot to mention during yesterday's episode when I went through Blackhawks and Blackhawks legends moves during free agency. Pius Suter, y'all remember him, spent his rookie season in the NHL with the Blackhawks. We'll be seeing more of him this upcoming season as he signed a 2-year deal with a $4.13 million AAV with the St. Louis Blues. And Suter is now 29 years old, coming off the best season of his NHL career with the Vancouver Canucks. Despite all the things that went wrong in Vancouver last year, Pius Suter made the most of his opportunity as he established himself as a really reliable middle six center and also produced 46 points, 25 goals, and 21 assists in 81 games. So we'll be seeing you soon, Mr. Suter. Another Blackhawks legend, Anthony Beauvillier, signed a 2-year deal with a $2.75 million cap hit to remain with the Washington Capitals. And after a tough stint for him with the Blackhawks, where he was a little bit injury-plagued, he capitalized last year in his chances with the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Washington Capitals. Tallied 25 points, 15 goals, 10 assists in 81 games. Decent production for a bottom 6 goal-scoring winger at this stage of his career. He'll be remaining with the Washington Capitals. And then last but certainly not least, we got Riley Stillman, who wound up signing a 2-year deal with a $775,000 cap hit. Would have been crazy, but not the probably most ridiculous thing Stan Bowman has ever done. But classic Stan Bowman here. Actually, now I got to look this up on my phone really quick. Give me the Riley. Was Riley Stillman there for Stan Bowman? Was he a Stan Bowman move? Yeah, he was a Stan Bowman move. Stan just cannot help himself, can he? Loves bringing back guys that he's familiar with. Absolutely classic. Riley Stillman, by the way, he's only played in 55 NHL games since the Blackhawks traded him. Very good piece of business by general manager Kyle Davidson to net Jason Dickinson for free. But there are the most noteworthy moves that went down in NHL free agency. Before I wrap things up here in just a moment, going to get into my biggest winners and losers from this year's free agent market. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen. Here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the offseason never truly begins, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. And you can go and check out Locked On NHL now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, real quick, before I tie a bow on today's show. I know we're already running a little bit late, but I wanted to get into my biggest winners and losers from free agency here this year. Starting with the winners, to me, I would say number one has to be the Florida Panthers. I thought it was going to be impossible for them to retain Bennett, Ekblad, and Brad Marchand, and they made it all happen. A scary thought for each and every all 31 other NHL franchises should be very terrified that Florida was able to bring back each of those three guys. Also, I would say Vegas, I know they didn't do a ton of noteworthy moves, and it feels like something still has to give for them, even with Alex Pietrangelo expected to potentially be hanging up the skates for his career because of injury. But getting Mitch Marner, I think, was the most noteworthy move. He was the best player on the market here this summer. So signing him to a long-term deal and giving a stacked forward group even more help. Yeah, Vegas is going to be a real threat next year in the Western Conference. I would say the Utah Mammoth have just had themselves a really good summer in general. I know we're breaking down free agency here, but getting JJ Peterka, signing him to that contract, I think it was a good piece of business for them, and they didn't have to give up the number 4 overall pick in exchange. They were still able to go and select Caleb Denye. They added Nate Schmid, 3-year deal. I don't necessarily love, but good veteran experience for a young team on the back end. They also brought in Brandon Tanev. Just did some good cleanup work that I think is going to help transition them to where they want to be. And same with the Montreal Canadiens. Feel like they have something special brewing. I know they got rid of 2 first-round selections, but they added Noah Dobson. And to think about him and Lane Hudson on the back end, that's going to be a very special group. They also got Zach Bolduc from the St. Louis Blues. I know they lost Joel Armia, and forward-wise, they didn't really add any true needle-moving help, but I do think Montreal continues to be going in the right direction. Then I would say the Carolina Hurricanes as well. Not an organization that I love, as I've been outspoken about many times, but getting K'Andre Miller to replace Dmitry Orlov, bringing in Nikolai Ehlers to give them more offensive help. 2 really good moves, I think, for Carolina, even though they didn't address the center ice position, like I mentioned earlier. Those would be the teams that stand out as winners, in my opinion. As far as losers go, number one, well, I guess I'm not ranking them number one, but first, I would say the Nashville Predators. I understand them maybe not panicking about what transpired last year, and you would think with the talent they do have offensively, I know they don't have any speed, but they do have capable goal scorers. I feel like they're due for some sort of regression. It can't get worse than it was last year for Nashville, I think. But for them to not really add anything offensively or give this offense more juice or more speed, I don't really understand that. I like adding Perbix on the back end, but just nothing encouraging for Nashville. Nothing to really make fans truly believe this season is going to be different. I would say the Minnesota Wild, and I'm not just hating on the Central Division here, but I would say the Minnesota Wild, even though they're still in salary cap restriction time, just the situation and not being able to get more center ice help, right? Joel Eriksson X still their number 1 center and their hopeful best center of the future, Marco Rossi, they're in a little bit of a dispute with. So not necessarily a great offseason for Minnesota, and just days continue to loom closer to, hopefully, as us Blackhawks fans want, Kirill Kaprizov hitting the free agent market. I think the Los Angeles Kings just gave out some interesting deals to Cody Ceci and Brian Dumoulin, continue to not have enough offensive support, I think, to get them over the hump or get them past the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So not good enough from the Kings, not good enough from Columbus. They missed out on seemingly everyone noteworthy. Then it felt like they kind of panicked and brought back Ivan Provorov on a 8-year deal, which he's a good player, but 8 years at that price tag, I didn't necessarily agree with. I would say the Buffalo Sabres, I don't know why they wouldn't trade JJ Peterka. I get Michael Kesselring's a good player. I get Josh Doan is a good depth piece. They're not needle movers. They're not guys that are going to get you to where you want. I just don't understand what the Buffalo Sabres are trying to do. And to think they traded JJ Peterka without getting a true, I like Michael Kesselring, but he's not a game changer. And the number 3, number 4 overall pick, even in a weaker NHL draft, I felt like that could have been a game changer. And I know it would have been a tough pill to swallow for Buffalo to have to go back into a starting over rebuild, but man, it just feels like they're in absolute despair right now. And then low key, I'm going to add the Chicago Blackhawks in here. I'm not biased. I'm not just always tooting Kyle Davidson's horn. I didn't think this offseason was good enough from the Blackhawks. I also understand why Kyle Davidson did the things that he did, but I also believe that he can accomplish what he wants to accomplish next year while also bringing in a legitimate top sixer. And proof of that to me, Blackhawks fans, is Anton Frondell perhaps considered to be, maybe in the conversation for the NHL roster out of training camp next year. If you have room for Anton Frondell, you could have brought in another offensive weapon. And yeah, I know maybe, again, they didn't have the pieces to go and get JJ Peterka, or it didn't make sense for them to get Marner or Ehlers because of their age or whatnot. But you can't, there's, at some point it becomes excuses when you have that for basically every single player. And for KD, again, just to not get Connor Bedard more help. As he's entering his third year in the NHL, to me, it's just absolutely not good enough, especially with the financial freedom that the Blackhawks have. And yeah, I'm sure Connor Bedard is understanding of the situation. We know Bedard's been outspoken about wanting to be here in Chicago, and I'm not worried about Connor Bedard not signing his next extension or whatever. But what I will say, Blackhawks fans, is it's easy to say all these things until you go through 3 straight, 55 loss seasons. And that's what the Blackhawks are possibly on the precipice of doing again this year. And that's going to weigh on a kid like Connor Bedard. Again, I don't think Bedard's in any jeopardy of leaving Chicago anytime soon or being unhappy or whatever it may be. But I also don't think he's 100% thrilled with the lack of help being brought in alongside him these last couple of years. In my opinion, Andre Burakovsky, I like that move. Ryan Donato, really good value. It's not good enough from the Blackhawks, in my opinion. So I'm going to put them in the loser category of this offseason. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Before I wrap things up, go and drop in the comment section below whether you think Anton Frondell will or will not be on the Blackhawks opening night roster come the start of the 25-26 campaign. And also let me know your biggest winners and losers of NHL free agency. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman2, but make sure to check out my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way, you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Till tomorrow's episode, everyone, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.